Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Cauldron. This week we've got Denise and Claire, and I'm going to start off by talking about some of my own news. So on the 15th of October, I started legal proceedings against Abertay University for the stress that they put me under while I was sitting my final law exams. I have a fundraising page set up, and that is lisakeogh.uk. I'm going to go over to Denise now and see what interesting news she's got for the week.
Kind of started off quite bad in the sense of Kathleen Stock, Dr. Kathleen Stock, the professor at the University of Sussex, resigning. But she wasn't resigned, she was forced out. And some of the behaviour of the trans allies over this, and they're gloating and they're high-fiving to each other, may be a little bit premature, because in the statement released by the University of Sussex, it states the university has been consistent and clear that everyone in our community has the right to work and learn free from bullying and harassment of any kind, which has not been the case for Professor Stock. So that paragraph there is the university admitting that she was bullied and harassed. And therefore, I would imagine that Kathleen Stock, should she choose to, has a very strong case to take the university to a tribunal, employment tribunal, for discrimination on the basis of belief. And discrimination in employment tribunal is unlimited and damages to the person involved. So I know that Professor Kathleen Stock is going to announce next week her further moves, and I kind of have fingers crossed that she's going to be suing the university. There's another professor suing a university at the moment as well that has an open crowdfunder. There's just around the target, Jo Phoenix, and she's a professor of criminology at the Open University, and she's suing the Open University. Now, the important thing about these cases is academic freedom is free speech. It happens to be on gender critical views, but it is to defend free speech. Now, what these people are saying are facts, although it has to be belief, because the Equality Act didn't think that they would have to protect facts. Nobody thought you would have to protect facts. There's a saying that says you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. Unfortunately, today, that doesn't seem to hold true anymore. And so the Equality Act doesn't protect facts, it only protects belief. So if you say facts that are biological truths, then the only way you can protect yourself is under the provision for belief. So what I'm hoping is that if the universities see, they don't care. Universities nowadays are a business. If they did care, they would be protecting academic freedom, because what are universities if they're not places of academic thought, academic work? And if they don't protect academic freedom, they're not fulfilling their duty as a university. Clearly, the universities are businesses, and so how do you change the behavior of a business? Change the behavior by hitting them in their profit margin. So if these universities start to get sued, it will be a warning to other universities to protect academic freedom. And we will see less cases of female academics being treated the way Dr. Stock has been and Jo Phoenix has been, and therefore it will be a good thing. Again, with Lisa's case, exactly the same. It is a freedom of expression case, stating biological fact, and this has to be protected, because if we don't base our reasoning, our laws on fact, if we don't base it on fact, then what do we base it on? Where are we? What kind of world is that? So these cases are incredibly important. So I hope that people will support them.
do you know what? It wasn't even biological fact. It wasn't only biological fact I stated. I also, I said that all men were not rapists. And that was again in the complaint against me. And if we look at universities, St Andrews University was in the Times quite recently because of they're doing a course and people have got to admit that they've got unconscious guilt and answer questions and think the way the university wants them to think. If they don't answer the questions correctly, they don't get onto the course that they want to go on. So it's like they're policing people's thoughts and telling people how to think now, not teaching them and helping them learn, but telling them what they should think and how to think. Anyway, that's enough for me. Claire, what have you got to think about this week?
Right, so I've got a bit of a difficult subject this week, so I wouldn't recommend any children listen to this part. Each week I do a lot of looking around the internet, finding interesting accounts, interesting YouTube podcasts, etc. So I've been aware of a woman called Alex Aaron, and I hope I've pronounced that correctly. And she has a YouTube channel called Gender Mapper. And she's really quite an interesting woman, but she's recently done quite a lot on porn. And basically there's links between porn and children identifying as transgender. And it got me to thinking, because I thought quite a lot. You hear within certain circles that sex work is work, etc. And I am very much of the opinion sex work is not work. It's basically abuse, violence, and exploitation. So I thought, well, what exactly is sort of sex work? Well, anyway, I've had my eyes opened completely by this woman, Gender Mapper, and I'm going to link her YouTube stuff on this so you can watch the full thing. But I've taken a few bits out of it, and I hope you bear with me as I try to explain, frankly, the horrors that are online waiting for your children. So, first of all, there's a young woman called Lana Rhodes, and I think she may still be, but she was the most successful porn star on Pornhub. She was very, very young. She basically, I think when she was 14, she saw something about Playboy Mansion and she thought the life was very glamorous. And she came from quite a dysfunctional home where she had a sister who had, I think it was schizophrenia, and she tried to kill herself and she'd found it. And, she'd been through a lot. She hadn't been sexually abused, but she had quite a traumatic past. Anyway, she saw this Playboy Mansion, decided these women had an amazing life, and went into porn. And she explained, now she was chatting to two women, and she explained there's two types of porn. There's something called gonzo porn, and then there's vanilla. Now, gonzo is really rough porn, like it's violent porn. It's anal sex, it's choking, it's non-consensual stuff. It's really violent, horrible stuff. And this, she says, by far is what men want, and this is the most popular porn on the internet. Vanilla porn, she described that as ethical porn. I don't think there's any such thing. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is she is actually the girlfriend of a YouTube influencer with, I can't believe it, 22 million followers. Most of these followers are young boys, okay? And I'm going to tell you the demographic at the end, but we will get into that. Now, he's 38 years old and his name is Logan Paul, and his podcast is called Impulsive. And this girl, I don't think she's doing porn anymore, but obviously she will never escape it because she's online and that will be forever. It's not like being a prostitute where you can maybe stop and you don't have to ever see these people again. She's there forever. And consequently, an internet search will find her like that. So she's now dating this guy and he's promoting her on his YouTube channel. And they're talking about lots of things, but it's quite sexually explicit. I mean, I was really quite surprised by some of the stuff that you can see that for yourself. Now she is in the Gender Mapper video. She was chatting about some of her experiences. Now, this is important when you come to think about who she's chatting to now, okay? So she was chatting to two girls. All of them are basically find porn. It's like normal. It's a normal part of life, and it's just part of the way that they have sex. And I'm going to read this. This is not my words, okay? This is her words. Now, she actually went to see a therapist about this because of basically the porn got more and more and more extreme, okay? Very, very violent and really unpleasant. And this is her talking about it. And she went to a therapist about it, and the therapist didn't know what to do with her, right? And I'm not surprised. So she was talking about a time where she had sex with a man. Well, I think frankly, I'd put it as rape, but she was choked to the point of seizure, okay? And then she was violently sick into a bowl, okay? This guy, and this is her words, he pissed into it, and during the scene, she had to drink that, right? And she says she didn't know how to say no to that. And she said that other times men, that again, this is her words, they piss into girls' vaginas, into their anuses, and into their mouths, right? Now, these are all videos freely available on Pornhub. And I think even now, if you would search for this stuff on YouTube, you'd probably find it, because if you do a search for Lana, you'll find it. So she's now talking to this YouTube influencer with 22 million followers, and the age demographic for that is 8 to 12 years old. So you parents need to have a look and see what the hell your kids are watching, because they are being exposed to this stuff. But when we think about porn, like my age group, we're probably thinking like Pammy Anderson, or, we're not thinking of the violence. We're really not imagining just how violent that can be. And this is young children, young boys, basically being groomed into thinking that women and girls are sex objects. And then we can link that back to maybe why girls don't want to grow up to be women. Who would? Who would want to grow up to think that that sort of sex is normal? Because it's just not.
Wow, that's hard to listen to. I actually was going to speak a little bit about self-ID. Somebody's just sent me an article, actually, I'll link it in the description as well. A skirt-wearing male student has been found guilty in Loudon County School bathroom rape. So I've had a quick skim of the article, and basically a young boy has been sexually abusing girls in a high school in Virginia, I think it was. He's now been found guilty, so that's a bit of good news. It's obviously not good news for the girls, multiple girls.
Loudon County one.
Yeah.
That was dreadful, and they tried to cover that up as well. The father was arrested,
Was he?
He was arrested, yeah. And it was only, when it came out what was going on and why he was upset, it was only then that they took that further. But they attempted to silence him.
That doesn't even surprise me now. I think that's why it's quite important that we bring to light the self-ID laws. I think I just kind of want to highlight exactly what self-ID is. It's not, people think that you've got to live as a woman to self-ID as a woman. That's what it used to be like. You used to have to live as the opposite sex for a couple of years. You used to have to undergo counselling and things like that. Whereas now it's not like that. People are just saying left, right and centre that they are the opposite sex. They're getting same-sex hormones, opposite sex hormones, sorry. But the self-ID, it's not even about that. The self-ID, you could be a bald man with a big beard, and you don't even have to wear a bit of lipstick or a dress. You can literally just self-ID as a woman. And this has given people access to women's change rooms. This has given men access to women's safe spaces. And this terrifies me, because self-ID, you only just have to say you're the opposite sex now. You don't have to present as the opposite sex. And this is what needs to hit home to people. People need to realise this.
Yeah, because predators, it's coming to the attention now of predators. And you know, they'll use any mechanism to gain access to your children, to vulnerable women, to anyone really that they can abuse. And, you know, I attended the talk in Falkland, and Eva Comrie actually said, you know, the gender reassignment stuff being put into a protected characteristic, that was a legal fiction, basically a kindness for a very, very tiny group of people, you know, to allow them to sort of fully integrate into society. You know, they'd gone through a sex change and, you know, lived in the sex that they felt more comfortable with. You know, they'd had a lot of cosmetic surgery, been through a lot to get there and do that. And now, your husband that's watching this, wake up tomorrow, or anyone that's got an abusive ex-husband, whatever, they could actually self-identify, and you've nowhere you can hide, not even prison. You couldn't even hide in prison. They'd be there following you there.
Yep, because we've actually got women being raped in prisons now.
This guy, Logan Paul, with his YouTube channel, since lockdown, he's been discussing more and more sexualised, apparently. And he's also had a sort of, I don't know, an internet star called Belle Delphine. Now, apparently, amongst transgender youth, this girl is very, very popular. She looks like an anime character. You know, the little characters with the wee ears, and they look really cute, and it's sort of Japanese type style. There's another type of porn called hentai porn, and that is basically, it's anime porn using like demented cartoon characters. And the piece that I'll link here actually describes an incestuous encounter, I suppose you would put it. It's just bonkers. Now, she's now on his site promoting OnlyFans. This guy spends the whole time talking about OnlyFans, Pornhub, and they're 8 to 12 years old, you know. So you think you've blocked porn on the phones, you think you've done everything possible with settings. They're still getting to your children because of YouTube and because of these influencers. You think they're innocuous, they think it's the all-American good guy. No, have a look and just see what your children are actually watching.
I think the scary thing with the anime porn as well is because it's a cartoon, they can literally draw grown men having sex with young girls.
It was a paedophile, it was a girl being raped by her uncle. That was what this thing was that I watched. I'll link it, I mean, you can watch it all for yourselves, but really, I think Gender Mapper is worth the watch.
And Denise, we'll go back to you.
So yeah, it's on self-ID. So there's been a poll out. The interesting thing here is that if you look at what's happening politically, in Westminster, the Conservatives are distancing themselves, shall we say, from the transgender industry. And even only today, they were looking at maybe preventing children being ideologically brainwashed by gender ideology. But of course, in Scotland, it's a bit different, because in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon is all in on the gender ideology and queer theory, because she's teamed up with Patrick Harvey, one of its top proponents, and also she's put a lot of political capital into this. She made a video when trans allies left the party, begging them to come back. She's ensured that anyone that doesn't go along with her gender ideology, such as Joanna Cherry, is frozen out, or Joan McAlpine, who she managed to gerrymander out of her seat as an MSP. So she's got far too much political capital invested in gender ideology to back off of it. People in her own party, like Kirsty Blackman, Mary Black, John Nicholson, and Stuart MacDonald, they're all like fully signed up proponents of this, but of course they're MPs, and she could face them down, but Nicola Sturgeon doesn't have the courage to face them down. So she'll try and push ahead with it. But it seems that Scotland isn't all that keen. Now, James Kelly, who runs a blogging site, Scott Goes Pop, and he's quite an expert on polls and has been doing this for, I think, about 10 years at least. And he's analysed all the polls. And he runs polls of his own. So he very kindly ran a poll on the Gender Recognition Act. And to give James his due, he had a little bit of confusion and difficulty with his fundraisers. And so he put some of his own money to this to allow him to do a proper full poll. So this is, and he's now fundraising to repay himself, as far as I understand. So there's a fundraiser for this as well. And so he did the poll, and he asked if he had to spend quite a lot of time getting the question agreed with the polling company. So the question is, gender dysphoria is a condition where a person feels a mismatch between their biological sex and their gender identity. For example, this may mean that a biological male individually feels strongly that they are female, or a biological female individually feels strongly that they are male. At present, most people who wish to legally change their sex or gender, you're not really quite right, because you only record sex, but anyway, the polling company insisted, or maybe James did, but it was to make the question very fair, recorded on their birth certificate must first receive a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria, but it's not necessary for them to have undergone gender reassignment surgery. The Scottish Government is committed to changing the law in Scotland within the next year to allow people to legally change their gender without a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria, provided they make a solemn declaration that they're living in their new gender and will continue to do so. So, as you see, the question doesn't bring in any negatives. It's very, very vanilla, and it's trying to be as fair as possible and not to bias, with no bias in it. I said, in your opinion, who should be eligible to legally change their sex or gender recorded on their birth certificate? So only 20% agreed with self-ID. Only 20% said anyone who makes a solemn declaration that they're living in their new gender. 18% said only people who have been medically diagnosed with gender dysphoria. And then 21% said only people who have undergone gender reassignment surgery. And 19% said nobody should be allowed to do this. And don't know was 22%. So if you see, you have to, if you remove the don't knows, obviously, that you're getting about, I think it's about 60, 20, 20, roughly. So if you took the don't knows out, it'd be 25 to 75. So it's like 3/4 of people are against self-ID. And Nicola Sturgeon is thinking she's going to go ahead with this. We'll see about that. There's a saying, no good deed goes unpunished. And probably the original Gender Recognition Act in 2004 was a good deed. But now we're being punished for it. Because now with changes with the human rights saying you don't have to undergo surgery, and changes saying you don't need a medical diagnosis, there's no gatekeeping. So any man can say it. So what they're thinking is, in the whole of the UK since 2004, there's only 6,000 people with a gender recognition certificate. But they reckon this could go up to between 200 and 500,000. That's how many people say they reckon is transgender. In Scotland, the Scottish Government estimates it will be 10 times the number. We've got a problem now that there's far, far more people can qualify for a gender recognition certificate. They can qualify just by saying so and self-declaring. And the problems that's going to come in is there's a very strange legal thing with this. So a male without a GRC is legally male. but a male with a GRC is legally female. So if you're doing something like trying to find out if you're getting paid as much as a man doing the same job as you, if that man declares himself to be female, so like there's no sex discrimination case anymore because you're comparing yourself as a female. So it has. And then also with the GRC, they'll be able to take advantage of women-only things. And in fact, people are taking advantage of women-only shortlists in politics, even without a GRC. But legally, they would be able to. But one thing that really worries me is the normalization of men in female spaces. And I think that that's where we're going to see the world change. Because it's not just the transgender identifying men that will be able to now get a GRC on their self-ID and have to be considered as female. It will also mean that you will see a lot of people that present as men in female spaces. They'll look like men. So how are you going to challenge these people? At the moment, the reason that men don't go into female spaces is because it's social convention. It's like why you don't drink drive. But if men are routinely in female spaces, then it will be normalized, and men who aren't transgender but just are going into female spaces for either power trip, to be violent towards women, to humiliate women, to act out some voyeurist fetish or flash their willies about. Men like doing that kind of thing. Just they will be able to do it, and women, we won't be able to stop them, and it will be normal, and that will be our normal world. Things like if they have a GRC, you can't really they don't have to tell you what their GRC status is. So if you questioned a man in a women's changing room and said, excuse me, do you have a GRC? They can say that's none of your business. They don't have to tell you. There's also, because they've legally changed their documentation, there's no real way of excluding biological males. So we had a big debate before Christmas in 2020 about the right of a female survivor of rape or sexual assault to be able to request a female examiner. And it was very controversial, but passed, and thanks very much to Joanne Lamont, who had the amendment, and a big, massive campaign by For Women Scotland that actually won the day. However, if somebody has a GRC, then how can a health board or a doctor's surgery or know that they are a man? So how can these kind of same-sex exemptions be enforced? It's got so many consequences for women, self-ID in all these different areas. But Nicola Sturgeon is probably politically determined to bring it in. There's been a few interesting changes happen within the SNP just for the last week. So Nicola Sturgeon has two big allies on the National Executive Committee and very, very committed to the gender self-ID. One's Fiona Robertson, who was defeated as Equalities convener, but because the Equalities convener left to join ALBA, she got the position. And the other is Rhiannon Spear, who was defeated as Women's convener last year in 2020. But again, the Women's convener left to join ALBA, so Rhiannon Spear came back on that position. Now, apparently, they've both resigned. And now it seems like not only has Rhiannon Spear resigned, but also she's not going to be standing as a councillor anymore. So I'm just wondering what's going on here. And Nicola Sturgeon today said she wanted to be a foster parent, and she's got her pictures in Vogue. So now I'm wondering if she's maybe going to be standing down, and they're going to replace her and possibly back off from self-ID. Yeah, you never know. It is possible.
Actually, talking about self-ID, oh, this isn't self-ID, this person's got a GRC. Is it Freddie who's pregnant with her second child, and she's trying to crowdfund to go to Sweden, I think it is, so that she can be named as a father on the birth certificate. Now, my thoughts on that are basically, if you are supposed to have your gender recognition certificate and you're living as the opposite sex, if you start living as your biological sex again, does that gender recognition certificate not get revoked? I might be mistaken, but what are you guys' thoughts on this Freddie situation? What do you think should be happening with her, Freddie?
Yeah, basically, if you can't get much more female than getting pregnant and giving birth.
Put on the birth certificate as the father. A father can't give birth.
Having cake and eating it. I mean, we see a very dystopian future when we go to the route of self-ID and people being allowed to change a birth certificate. That's wrong. We shouldn't be allowed to actually change that document.
It's a legal document.
It's a legal document. It's a factual legal document.
That was one thing that happened. They decided to tell a lie, and they knew it was a lie. They were going to make the birth certificate a lie, and it's all flown from lies. It's when we started telling lies, trans women are women, trans men are men, changing birth certificates. And now lying is become acceptable. There was news this week that they can tell the sex of babies at 7 weeks because male babies produce different hormones in the placenta, in the womb, when they're in the womb, than babies that are girls. So they're going to be able to tell them at 7 weeks. How does that fit with the signing at birth? It just doesn't. You know at 7 weeks what sex the baby is. But the problem is that the girl babies will be aborted. Yeah. And so sex they'll always know who they're going to abort. They'll always know who they're going to rape. They'll always know who they're going to oppress. They'll always know who they're going to pay less to. They'll always know who they're going to ignore. And it will always be on the basis of sex, regardless of what else they do in the world. They'll know the ones that they're going to mutilate.
Sad reality. Anyway, ladies, thank you very much for your company tonight. Do you guys have any final words, Denise?
Yeah, just really fantastic for Marion. She should never have been put through what she was put through. It is really suspicious how it happens to be once again a friend of the First Minister that's a complainant. And I don't know if she can bring a case, or she wants to bring a case for malicious prosecution against the Crown Prosecution Service, as Mark Hurst's doing. The process is the punishment. And the hate crimes bill has not been put into law yet, I think because they know it's a dog's dinner and they know what they'll unleash once they put this bill into law. What it will mean is a lot of women being reported to the police and a lot more Marion Millers that the Scottish Government will have to cope with. So I don't know what Marion's plans are, but I think it's fantastic news for her. And also, you have to take your hat off to Joanna Cherry. Obviously, they didn't fancy facing her across the courtroom. So yet another victory for Joanna Cherry. So, and good for Marion. So.
And Claire, what are your final words for the night?
Well, I've got two things. First thing, I was really pleased to see the BBC report on the coercion of lesbians have sex with men. I think that was really brave of them, finally, and very, very much needed. And it seems to be such a huge problem for lesbians in particular. So it's good to see some light being shone there. And the second thing, as I say, I follow ex-Ulanzik on YouTube, and I can't recommend that woman enough. She asked this question, and it stuck with me, and I think it won't leave me. Who might want to create legal adults in the bodies of children?
So that's actually a very true sentiment, actually. And just with regards to the BBC stuff, the question I ask myself is, why do these men want to have sex with lesbians? Why not heterosexual women? There might be some heterosexual women that are perfectly happy to have sex with these men. My final words for the night are just please donate and share my crowdfunding page. If you can donate, that would be fantastic. If you can't, please share. And if you can donate, share as well. The site is lisakeogh.uk. and that the total should be getting updated in a couple of days. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.